Welcome to the weekend edition of the Fast 5 Business News by Fear and Greed. I'm Michael Thompson and hello, Sean Aylmer.
Hello, Michael.
Sean, on weekends, it is very different to our weekday show. The weekdays are all about the Fast 5, the top 5 business stories in 5 minutes. On the weekend, we still keep it to 5 minutes, but we are going to pick out the biggest business story of the week, the most remarkable business story, a sleeper story, one that's kind of flying under the radar a little bit, and then our favourite business-ish story. Let's jump straight into the biggest one, though. What was it for you this week?
All the legislation that passed this week, 30 pieces of it, thanks to a mega deal between the government, the Greens and Independents, David Pocock and Jackie Lambie. That grouping passed 27 pieces of legislation. The government and the coalition got together on some of the other stuff. What was it all about? Well, there was changes to the Reserve Bank Board, introduction of a Future Made in Australia legislation. That's a stack of money to help transition to net zero. There was changes in the housing market, hopefully to improve the housing crisis. The ban on under 16-year-olds using social media was introduced. Changes to migration laws, a few things that weren't in it. Extra tax on earnings from super accounts, that didn't make it. There are also proposed electoral reforms that didn't make it. Very busy week, Michael.
Certainly was. Also a big week globally as well, Sean, because we had Donald Trump earlier in the week declaring that he would impose a 25% tariff on all products from Mexico and Canada on his first day in office. He hasn't even taken office yet. It's not for another kind of 5 or 6 weeks or so. 10% as well on goods from China. This is all over kind of illicit drugs and issues like illegal immigration. It was a very, very aggressive move. And it scared investors. Markets fell. A few commodities fell. The US dollar surged. The shockwaves from this kind of did roll out around the world. China, remarkably, was the voice of reason here, saying that a trade war helps no one. The thing is, this might all just be political posturing, and look, it probably is, but it does suggest that, hey, we are in for a fairly chaotic 4 years. Locally, the local markets were hit as well, but then they bounced back, and they bounced back really, really well, and we actually ended up having a number of records. We had another record high for the ASX 200, another record for Commonwealth Bank, just a big week overall. Global markets, local markets, investors everywhere. Everyone's affected right now, Sean.
Can I tell you my most remarkable story? Well, I'm going to anyway. It's the fact that superannuation, the amount of superannuation in the system is now $4.1 trillion, up 4% during the September quarter. A couple of reasons for that. The superannuation guaranteed went from 11 to 11.5% on July 1, also strong market returns. What's pretty incredible, though, of that $4 trillion, about 25% are self-managed super funds, people doing their own investing for retirement. Not sure whether that's a good or a bad thing. This pot of money is going to keep growing. 11.5% of our wages each week goes into super. Mind you, 2.5 million people are retiring over the next decade, so some will come out. Quite remarkable, that pot of honey that is super.
Yeah, it's just huge, isn't it? The other remarkable thing this week was just we saw that we just really can't get inflation under control, it seems. The underlying inflation measure, which is the RBA's preferred rate, the one that they really look at when they're making their decisions about interest rates, etc., actually rose. It rose from 3.2% to 3.5%. These price pressures that we've been talking about now for so long are persisting. This is not getting better at this point. The headline inflation figure was perhaps a little bit misleading if you just look at that. And it's at 2.1% and you go, yes, hey, this is great. We're at the kind of the bottom of the RBA's target range. But when you take away the energy rebates and all these other things, the headline numbers will then kind of jump. The problem is, for anyone with a home loan, is that the Reserve Bank is looking for sustained reductions in inflation. So we're talking kind of 2 quarters here. That means, unfortunately, it's pretty unlikely there'll be rate cuts until the middle of next year, really, at the earliest, which will be, from a political perspective, after the federal election as well. Just adds another little element into the mix, doesn't it, Sean?
Sure does, Michael. Now, my sleeper story of the week, deals are back. We had you just mentioned inflation. We had all the legislation going through in Parliament. We had Donald Trump. Underneath all that, we had a bunch of deals. PE Group, Pacific Equity Partners, made a bid for SG Fleet Group, the leasing company. IAG, which already owns the RACV and NRMA, well, it's going to buy the RACQ, the Royal Automobile Club of Queensland. We had American real estate giant Proprium Capital bidding $374 million for AV Jennings. AV Jennings is one of the oldest house builders in the country. All of a sudden, at the bottom end of the market, we're starting to see a bunch of deals. It's great to see.
Yeah, it certainly is. Can I nominate a favourite story, Sean? And I suspect this could almost be our joint favourite story, because we've talked a lot, both on and off air this week, about subsea cables. It just seems to have fascinated us. Now, these are cables that are a long way below the ocean. They're on the ocean floor. They run between countries, between capital cities, all over the place. It is basically what allows information to move around the world. All right. And so there's 1.5 million kilometers of these subsea data cables, essentially crisscrossing the ocean floors. And we had two big stories come out about them this week. Number one was that the tech giant Google backed Australia Connect, which is a project that will build two new of these subsea cables between mainland capital cities and Christmas Island. So that is a big project that is going to help Australia maintain its connectivity with the rest of the world. Fantastic. You go to the other side of the world, right? You head a long way north. And you've got a Chinese ship suspected of severing two critical internet cables in the Baltic Sea. There's speculation that this is an act of sabotage that may have been orchestrated by Russia. This Chinese-registered bulk carrier allegedly dragged its anchor along the seabed for more than 160 kilometres, just severing cables, just anything that was in its path. The suggestion that China is potentially behind all of this, and the best part, of course, is the senior European investigator that told the Wall Street Journal it is extremely unlikely that the captain would not have noticed that his ship dropped and dragged its anchor, losing speed for hours and cutting cables on the way. It just shows the importance of these cables. Just an extraordinary story all round, Sean.
Sure is, Michael.
All right, there we go. 5 minutes and pretty much everything you need to know in the world of business. Thank you very much, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
And make sure you're following the podcast, and please join us online on LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. I'm Michael Thompson, and this is the Fast 5 Business News by Fear and Greed.